This B2B SaaS homepage said easy employee program, but these founders, they're actually building an executive influence engine for really highly regulated large industries. In this Clarity Jam, we dug into the gap between what their platform actually does, sentiment analysis, compliance workflows, AI supported approvals, and what the site sounded like it was selling. We talked about how to lead with their messaging wedge, why stock photos can taint trust, and how to reframe growth in enterprise terms. Let's dive into it.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Alan. I'm one of the co-founders here at Social HP.
Awesome. And Brad?
Brad Dickinson. I'm another co-founder here at Social HP and been in the advocacy world for 15 years and doing this for over a decade now.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on Clarity Jams. Can you tell me a little bit about how you kind of got into the advocacy space?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually kind of a funny story how Alan and I got together specifically, but I think we would come together and say that we saw a blind spot in advocacy, frankly, and it boiled down to the ability for teams who are also oftentimes in charge of the messaging, the brand messaging, the approving of content. There was a disconnect between that world and the world that's responsible for publishing the content, which are all the employees. The teams are very focused on getting the content right, having that available to people, and then the people that are responsible for publishing it don't know where it is, don't know how to get it, don't know how to post it, simply are too busy and or too lazy. And so to bridge that gap between the resources that are available to represent an organization on social platforms and actually getting that content published on behalf of the people that should be publishing it was our focus, and it's what Social HP does.
Awesome. And share a little bit more about how you got started with Social HP.
So I was in the advocacy world. Again, I've been in the advocacy world over 15 years now. I was with a company that doesn't exist anymore through mergers and acquisitions. But Alan had Social HP in his head as a brainchild, kind of understanding the landscape and the challenges of digital marketing and social marketing specifically, and kind of had an idea of what the silver bullet might look like, and reached out to me at the time just to get an understanding of basically what would be competition. We hit it off in terms of just our personalities and styles and what I knew about the advocacy world and vice versa. And we decided to jump into what is now Social HP and make it work together.
I love it. And I can just kind of see up to the top of your screen. I know you've kind of evolved the platform a lot as you've been working on this for, I want to say, about a decade. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
I love it. I love chatting with that. I love kind of chatting and seeing how companies have evolved. Can you share some of the things that you're kind of focused on today, and maybe what were some of the most surprising things that you've learned over the last decade of this company?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most surprising thing that we learned and has affected our business over the last couple of years recently is something that frankly shouldn't have been that surprising. We started off addressing everybody the same. So advocacy is advocacy. You've got 1,000 employees. The goal was to identify content that's approved for distribution and activate 1,000 employees to share it to their personal profiles. That was the name of the game. In advocacy, it still is for a number of different reasons across the competitive landscape. But what we realized, and again, when you hear it, it shouldn't have really been a shocker, but it was. And that is that the executive suite is the most valuable voice on social, right? They carry an outsized ability to impact the audiences that you want to move, whether it's talent acquisition and retention, whether it's partnerships, whether it's business development, whether it's shortening sales cycles. All of those things can be impacted by a successful social strategy. And the best people to do that is your executive suite. And so we realized that it was important for us to understand the challenges as to why you normally saw organizations quiet at the upper levels, and then facilitate a way for these organizations to turn those voices on, in essence. There's a lot of compliance issues when you get to the upper level, a lot of legal issues, optics and PR play a role. And so it's not just about getting the branded approved content into little old Brad's hands so we can put it on LinkedIn. You got to address it from a number of different reasons to ensure that it can be done by the executive team. And that's what we focus on now, is facilitating that process.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And obviously you just said like probably the clearest thing ever, which is it's going to have the biggest impact from the executives compared to everyone else within the company. And you kind of hinted at some of the challenges of executives not having enough time to particularly be on LinkedIn, and then there's compliance, legal, PR. Is there any other kind of, main objections or challenges that you're kind of having faced with building out these executive advocacy programs?
They basically boil down to how do you effectively promote the executives, but also protect them and the brand. And those are the kind of the two sides of the fence that you have to play. You have to make it really easy for the executives to make these decisions and get the job done. You have to make sure that all of the content is actually designed and created and sounds in line with the personal brand of the executives, and it's something that they should be promoting. So when we build a strategy with a partner, we'll oftentimes use the term organizational thought leadership. And that is just understanding who your variables are, who your big players are, and aligning the right content pillar behind that person. So if Brad focuses on capital markets and Jessica focuses on consumer banking and Alan focuses on, wealth management, I shouldn't be the one to deliver the wealth management message. Doesn't make any sense. It should be Alan, right? So it's as simple as some of the blocking and tackling from that perspective, but then making sure that there's a system and a support structure in place to help teams who are woefully understaffed and under-resourced to be able to create the content that will resonate with these various audiences. Then also make it easy for Alan and Jessica and Brad to look at this stuff, go, yeah, man, this looks like me, it sounds like me, it's great. And then finally deliver on what we call the last mile, which is getting it published by these various executives without making them lift a finger. So those are all kind of challenges that we address in terms of how we can promote the appropriate content through the right leaders. And then you got to protect them and the brand. So if Alan is our fearless leader and he's the CEO of a major consumer bank, if he says something on LinkedIn, he can crash a stock. He can move a market. And that's not just him saying, hey, I'm so important, I better look out what I say. The FCC, the SEC can all come and sue somebody like Alan for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time on LinkedIn. So it's not just about a personal opinion anymore. You really do have to look at the legalities of what's being said and the compliance landscape in terms of how your content is constructed. So the protection of both the individual and the brand itself is something that we focus heavily on.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And just from the examples you shared, I'm going to assume a lot of the customers of social HP tend to be wealth management or banks or maybe even healthcare or like highly regulated, very large organizations with lots of executives and lots of complexity.
That's right. As a rule of thumb, you'll see two commonalities amongst our client base, and that is highly regulated and relatively large. There are outliers there, of course, but regulation and size both play into our favor. Absolutely.
I love it. And what are some of the things that Social HP does to solve some of those complexities and makes it easier for these large, highly regulated, highly complex organizations to be able to do executive employee advocacy?
So number one comes down to understanding what they should write. A lot of people gear up, get ready to go and think, man, this is going to be great. We're going to get all our content out there. And they didn't even really back up for a start to understand what's resonating with audiences. And the reason why is because you are not the audience. You can't answer that question just by saying, geez, what are these people going to like? You don't oftentimes have the ability to access and analyze consumer sentiment around these different messages. And so one of the first things that we enable our partners to do is to access LinkedIn in a way to where they can understand audience sentiment. What is being talked about? How is it being talked about? Who is talking about it? What are the frequencies? All those different types of things so that they can assess what's successful within different audiences, because my audience may be different than somebody else's. And so to be able to dissect the various communities on LinkedIn and understand what resonates with them is step number one. If you don't know what to say, you might as well just write whatever and put it out there and cross your fingers, which is a traditional approach, right? So that's step number one. Step number two is customizable approval processes for this. So Alan, being who he is, again, we go back to him being our fearless leader, high optics, high complexity, high regulatory landscape, it's not just a matter of putting it in front of Alan and saying, hey, what do you think? Does it sound like you? Does it look like you? Because now not only are we, not mitigating any sort of real risk that we have, we're putting his neck on the line. If he gives his thumbs up to that, and we never ran it past legal or compliance or anything else, now he's going, oh, geez, I don't want to give you my thumbs up, even if it sounds great to me, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not on our general counsel team, right? So you got to be able to take each individual message and put it through the appropriate approval process for Alan, which might look totally different than the approval process that's necessary for Jessica and or Brad. And so understanding the different scenarios that can play out for each individual leader and being able to address the security and compliance concerns of them individually is really, really important for success at scale. Because again, this needs to be done at scale. Even just 3 executives, like we're kind of walking through in our hypothetical, let alone 30. How can a team of 3 comms people support 30 executives? The math falls over on itself unless you've got really tight workflows that are very focused on how you can do this very, very quickly and effectively, which brings me to the last bit I would speak to, which is AI. Right? We have the ability to help you understand what you should be saying and how to create that messaging effectively. We have the ability for you to identify the approval processes that it needs to go through. But then how do we create it at scale as well? So AI is really good at taking large amounts of data and understanding it. If we can take all of the data that we have access to that says this topic, this style of messaging, this sentiment has been really effective with this audience, and we know we want to persuade that audience, AI can then generate a version of that message for us. Of course, you have full control over that message. You can edit it, tweak it, make sure AI isn't hallucinating on you and things like that. But it enables you to do a lot more with a lot less at the end of the day, automate some of those processes.
Absolutely. So I'm basically hearing 3 core value props: the sentiment analysis to figure out co-creation with executives, and then of course the AI for both analyzing the data and helping with creation as well. And then I think I said, oh wait, that sentiment analysis, approvals, and also AI for both data and also co-creation. None of that right now is listed within your H1, where your H1 right now screams the fastest and easiest way to create an employee advocacy program. So you sound like every other employee advocacy program out there. Why is your H1 not something along the lines of what you just said, which was sentiment analysis, approvals, AI for really highly regulated organizations and their executives in them?
Yep. And the short answer to that is something that we joke about internally here. And that is the cobbler's kids have no shoes, right? He's busy making everybody else's shoes, making sure that they look great and have solid soles, and his shoes are in the back. His kids are in the back with no shoes. So this is something that we focus really heavily on for our partners. And at this point, with the resources, the bandwidth that we have, we end up falling short on our own thought leadership and even the way that we're representing ourselves on the web page at the moment.
I totally get it. As a messaging positioning person, I'm the first one to say, I totally get it. Cowboy shoes problems, myself, every single agency I've ever had on to Clarity Chance as well, pretty much says the exact same thing. So incredibly common. But let's help you kind of work through and workshop this even more. So the next piece of this, which is connect, distribute, and grow, it's as easy as that. From what you've already shared with me, that feels so disconnected from what your actual audiences do, from what your actual ICP cares about, which is, how do we actually promote these executives within these companies in a way that's secure, that has the approvals, doesn't create brand risk. I would lead into that instead of connect and grow, which to me sounds a lot more like SMB to mid-market.
Yeah, a little bit of the connect and grow is logistics of what you actually have to do in the platform, kind of get wired up. But the growth, I would say that the growth bullet point actually still does speak to a pretty powerful value proposition that we're delivering on today. And it's not necessarily in what your brain first goes through. which is grow the organization, amplify the brand, create awareness. That's what you think of when you look at this page and you think about advocacy and activating large numbers of people to disseminate a message. You're trying to amplify that message and grow your awareness. But we do still today focus on growing the appropriate connections for the executives. So one thing that we oftentimes forget about when we think about our social strategy is that it's a two-way street. These are networks and these are partnerships and relationships that, just like any relationship, you want to invest in and you want to be in the right room. We think so much about content from our perspective and how many times do I need to post and when should I post. It's not about posting, posting, posting. It's about stopping for a second, listening, understanding who else is talking about things that are also relevant to you, and then making those friends and being in that room. And so the growth part of it, when I think about how it's evolved for us, is really being able to take Jessica and say, hey, Jessica, you've got this track record of expertise in, capital markets, whatever kind of hypothetical I used to begin with, but you're connected to people that are from your past career or just a different stage in life. So to be able to understand what world Jessica should be plugged into and what other people kind of look like her in terms of their professionalism, their expertise, their desires, the outcomes there could potentially work towards supporting other partners, joint partnerships, things like that. That's where the growth comes into play now, because a lot of people don't go through the process of really understanding their followers, their connections, the people that they are in this relationship with on LinkedIn particularly, and then kind of assess that and drive towards being in the room that they should be in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally does. And I love how you just reframe that. And I think the grow point is important, but I would lean into that specific, that being a little more specific around what growth actually means, because I don't necessarily know if what you have now communicates that as effectively as you just did 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I look at it here, without the context, it's kind of growth in terms of awareness.
Yeah. The other thing I'm just going to point out is I don't have a problem with the two CTAs. I think in your case, it probably makes a ton of sense. I'm going to guess, but feel free to answer this the other way, that most people there, you probably do see a split between watch the video and also book a demo, and not everyone's ready to book a demo yet.
Yep. I think there's probably an opportunity for us to create a little bit more of a funnel on the website. If you go all the way back to the reason the website exists in the way that it does now is because 99.9%, I would say 100, but there may be that one in there, as they say. Nobody buys this without a very long conversation. Because particularly where we focus now at that executive suite with the types of kind of critical messaging that's required to kind of make these folks look good. Nobody looks at the website, swipes the credit card, and goes, "Awesome! I'm gonna start to use this tool to support my CEO of a Fortune 500 company." It just doesn't happen, right? So this is kind of our way to engage with people that might want to have that conversation. They can book a demo right from here. Obviously watching the video and being able to do what you can on the website will help, but the main goal of our website is simply to generate conversations that we know are going to happen throughout the process.
I think you're super spot on right there. And this is one of the times where I will differ from a lot of people out there. And I always say dual CTAs in your hero is not necessarily a bad thing. In a scenario like yours, where there is a long sales cycle, people need to have built up a lot of trust. One thing I suspect that you could instantly do within your hero section that would instantly give you way more is, instead of just, I don't mind 4.9 rating on G2, 4.7 rating on Capterra, even though it's basically invisible on this page. What you could do instead is, given your complexity and knowing the fact that it's highly regulated, large healthcare, wealth management, bank type of organizations, I would spell that right in your hero section. And ideally either have logos if you can get away with it. I know that's really, really hard in your space. Or can you add in anonymous case study quote that's just a banger that just kind of instantly signals that, and also in your H1 point back to the types of organizations you work with, so that anyone on this page instantly knows from that comms teams knows this is a platform for them, and not a platform for an SMB or a mid-market company, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's nice to hear somebody that understands how challenging it can be to get a big company to let you use their logo. So
I get it. If
appreciate
you
that.
want
We
to
do the
geek out
best
a
we
little
can.
bit more on how to actually make that happen, I'm going to assume getting case studies approved from PR, legal, compliance, and then an enterprise organization, next to impossible.
Yep.
In some cases, sometimes you can make it happen. Typically, if you word that as part of your sales process. The other place where I've seen it work really well is to just get them on to, co-create a webinar with you or something like that, where it's not necessarily a case study, but you don't need all the same approval processes, and you can still get them to share a little bit more about how they're using something like social HP. Not a case study, but you can still use it like one.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Absolutely.
Awesome. If you want to keep scrolling down.
Sure.
So, okay, I see the logos. I would already just automatically say, move those up so it's above the fold. You already have the logos, move that up higher. So that's way more social proof than 4.9 out of, on Gardner or on G2 or on Capterra. I would move those logos up. And then I'd also, if you are going to keep kind of those reviews and Capterra and all that stuff, maybe put in there the number of reviews you have, so that it has a little bit more weight there as well. Then the next question I had for you is, I'm assuming this one-click solution to your social media problem, that doesn't really seem in line with what you've already shared today about how comms teams and executives are actually using the platform.
Yep, this is definitely a throwback bullet point to advocacy, which the good news about advocacy is that it never goes away. It's not necessarily our focus in terms of the value that we can return to our partners. Again, 5 times the voice of their brand page, 10 times the voice of any other employee. The bang for your buck is going to come from the executives. And there's a little bit more, workflow that's involved in supporting those executives. But when it comes to activating 1,000 people, just from an advocacy perspective, that amplification, that can be done with a one-click solution, so to speak. So that's kind of where this communications is coming in is, how do you take 500 people that don't even remember their LinkedIn password, and are busy to get to share on LinkedIn? That literally can be done with maybe 1 click is a little much, but 2 clicks, you can do that type of thing. So this is kind of coming from the legacy platform.
Got it. I would, in that case, this isn't bad, but I think what you just said before, which is, the 5x simplification from executives and how that spells out, is way more compelling in this section than what you have now. Scroll down. I like the quote. That makes a ton of sense. Love the case study. Why is that buried? Like, why is that not way above, higher in the above on this page?
Good question. Yeah.
Got it.
I think case
Next
studies are
question.
something people oftentimes are after. So present that a little bit more, with a little bit more availability would help us.
Absolutely. Next question I have for you is there any reason why you're using stock photos? And you kind of switched from kind of custom graphics within, totally custom graphics within kind of what it looks like your platform, to now having things that look like they're stock photography with a little bit of a graphic tied into it.
Yeah.
Mostly budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you thought, and I totally get that, have you thought, and the reason I'm bringing that up is oftentimes when you see stock photos on a very much an enterprise leaning software product, it tends to kind of make the brand sometimes look a little bit less premium. So I would even just say in general, like, could you just take more screenshots from within your platform, or even just go a little bit more text heavy if you have to, so that you can kind of remove the generic look that sometimes stock photos have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely worth a shot. I'm curious, just if we go back to the case study, just as an example, and I'll give you something that we've seen. I'm curious if it's unique to us or if in your experience you've kind of seen a tangible difference. Positioning the case study higher up on the website, more available, kind of getting into people's hands. And we'll hear folks all the time ask for a case study, talk about case studies. However, on the flip side of that, we'll have how many downloads a day this case study, Alan? 1, 2, 3 a day. Very rarely does it show any sort of actual indicator that there's any more of a buying intent there or any more conversion than anything else that we deal with. There doesn't seem to be any sort of impact to somebody getting this in their hands. They'll ask for it. They'll download it even without ever talking to us, but it doesn't actually, like, that cohort of people that downloaded and or asked and interacted with this case study show almost no statistical, improvement towards a buying decision. So, that's one of the reasons I think we don't have more case studies. We produced a number of them. Obviously, this one with Turbonomic, one with Conoco Minolta, which is a big brand. And they went out there, we pushed them, we shared them, people downloaded them. Hey, Alan, what do you think about that case study? It didn't really seem to move the needle. Is that just us and our case studies, or what's your experience with that?
That is a great question. So one question I have for you before I answer this, which is, what are typically, I know this is a long sales cycle, but what is typically the last thing somebody does before they realize, hey, I'm going to sign up for social HV? Like, what is kind of that state of mind that they're in? What's that kind of emotional side of things?
I would say that the last thing that we need to get done, when regardless of how we find somebody, is kind of get cross team approvals and sign off. It's one of the challenges with what we've done and how we've evolved over time is we're usually working across a number of different decision makers, marketing, comms, PR. These large companies have departments that are exclusively dedicated to executives, executive comms, or offices of the CEO, those types of roles. So you're dealing with multiple different stakeholders. And so we kind of go through these 4 mini sales cycles with each of the stakeholders. And then the last process that needs to happen is to get all of those people that have basically said, yeah, this provides value to me, to come together and decide what that actually looks like as a buying decision for a very large organization.
And who's kind of your initial person that you chat with, and who's kind of the initial, and are they also the champion? Like, what's their job title? Who's typically the one who first reaches out and are the one who's kind of being the champion across and helping you kind of get across the finish line across all these teams?
Comms would be the single answer to that. Obviously sometimes we'll start with digital marketing. Sometimes we'll start with social marketing. Smaller companies, sometimes it's a CMO, right? It is an executive themselves. But, for the sake of our conversation, I think the most common person for us to initially engage with and drive this process through the organization would be a communications leader, director of communications, global communications, that type of person. And they're bringing in marketing for the impact that it has there on lead generation and advocacy. They're bringing in any sort of executive leadership representation that needs to be involved in the process as well.
Yeah. So your champion is usually a comms leader.
Yep.
And then going back to the case study piece, who are the people who are downloading the case study and reading it?
I'd have to look at that as well, but it's usually the same types of stakeholders that are in our process, comms and marketing. I would say we get a lot of digital marketing and digital communications folks that download the.
That could be an interesting thing to look into a lot more, because my theory behind this is if you're seeing a huge drop off between who reads the case study and also, actually longer and, sales cycles closing, it could be that it might actually end up being somebody who doesn't have the authority within the organization or the budget or the sway to bring more people in. So you might end up with a bunch of people who are downloading it, who like it, but don't have the authority, and they're just getting stalled. So if those people, if that mismatch is different than the folks who are like the actual comms leader and or like the CMO and other people who have that sway, then it might be okay, it's a case study that's not written in a way to convert. But it sounds to me like it actually might be, hey, it might actually be working, but it's working with people who don't have the authority to drive the discussion forward.
Yeah, great point. That could definitely be it.
Just to jump on that, that's probably one of the reasons why we're taking a slightly different approach to our marketing. We're analyzing a lot of the trends and data. We're highlighting successful posts from different executives, and then we're sharing those successful posts with their competitors. So let's say the three of us work at separate companies. Jessica, Brad, and Alan work at three different companies. Brad just wrote a post that was really impactful on one of the social media platforms. We're gathering that data and then we're sharing it with you and me, Jessica, saying, hey, Jessica, one of your top competitors, Brad, just had a really successful post on LinkedIn. Gosh, looks like you're getting your lunch handed to you. You might want to think about, working on your persona because it has a huge impact on the company. And the reason why I'm saying that is you said a couple of interesting things that we also kind of figured out in our journey as well. One, no CEO of any Fortune 1000 company is going to read, case study. It's just not going to happen. Two, even if their PR and comms person comes along to them and says, "Gosh, I read this really great case study, and you should think about it, read it, blah blah blah." It's just not going to work for us. I don't think. Versus, looking at how high level executives think and how competitive they are against other executives, right? And so we're trying to shorten our sales cycle and find those budgets and find those people who have the clout to say yes. And what we're finding is it's the executives. And so, yeah, while our website has value, I think there are other styles of marketing that are going to be proved to be more effective for us. And in this particular case, it might be cold outreach or it might be outreach on social media platforms themselves, is what we're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also, there's so many things you can do there and even use your website in unconventional ways to kind of stoke a little bit of that competition and shorten the sales cycles as well.
Yeah, we're exploring that as well, with the idea of leaderboards for different executives inside of different verticals that make a lot of sense for us. So you can download, different, are you the most important executive in the U.S. brewery industry, as an example? Are you one of the most important executives in the banking software space? So we're again learning, growing, exploring, and we're rethinking how much time we're investing into case studies. Case studies are great, and they're always going to have a place in our world, but we're finding that people are having so much information thrown at them now. There's like, to get someone to sit down and actually digest a whole case study, I don't know, unless you're going to committee, I don't know how frequently these are being actually digested.
Totally. And even to your point, you can even take those kind of leaderboards and throw those onto your homepage. There's nothing that says you have to get lead with a case study. It could also just be a little bit of just checking who's actually watching it, but it could literally be leading those leaderboards and having them be gated and have those on your homepage could be way more effective than anything you're doing right now.
Gotcha. This has been really kind of insightful, and obviously this is what you do on a day in and day out basis. What are some of the most impactful website transformations that you've handled? And what has that meant? Just I'm curious, what's even possible if you were to redo our website? How meaningful could it be? What have you seen in terms of successes and failures?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in general, some of the biggest successes and the thing I see across every website that I've personally touched with clients, as well as things that I've done on this show as well, is tied to social proof, understanding what is, and then also understanding what I call your messaging wedge. So what is that initial thing that is the last touch point that happens, or that last action that happens before someone decides, hey, I'm going to sign up for social HB. That is really my specialty, which is all about thinking about what is that secret sauce? What is that, what I call a messaging wedge? And then making that messaging wedge front and center across your entire website. So you want to have it be in your hero section and then echoed out in different ways across the entire homepage. The next thing inside of that as well that is incredibly impactful throughout is social proof. And it can look different for everyone. Sometimes it's literally just logos. and review counts. Other times it could be, to your point, the leadership boards and or thinking through how do actually executives actually consume and or need this type of product and what's going to resonate with them. Sometimes it's case studies, sometimes it's testimonials. Those are kind of the key, really big pieces. And then there's a lot of other things that go into it as well when it comes to how do we communicate our actual value props and not just features or benefits. It's like, what are the core value props? So in your case, what I'm hearing over and over again, sentiment analysis, approval processes, hearing about AI for data and co-creation, making it easy for the comms team, all of that stuff as well.
Incredible. That's it's always great to come on to podcasts like this and learn a lot. And it's not often that someone's been kind enough to give us this kind of in-depth feedback that we can kind of squirrel away, run back with, and think about internally.